Hey guys, this is J-Rod once again, and today we have the man of the hour, Luke Barwikowski, founder of Pixel. Hello, Luke. How are you? Thanks for joining.
Hey, doing good. Finally got some rest after the crazy weekend. Yeah, thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
Let's go. Let's go. So I wanted to start with the beginning, right? Onboarding. Gaming is a great way to onboard people into the Web3 ecosystem. And could you share a bit your strategies on how Pixel plans to simplify the onboarding process?
Yeah, so we think about this in a couple areas. One, we want to get rid of most of the pain of interacting with Web3 games. We never want people to sign any transactions. We never want people to have to pay gas as they play the game. These are things that would basically ruin the game experience. And for us, it's a really big priority to make sure that the game experience feels fun. Now, that being said, too, we also really like to think about what the actual value proposition of our game is. And we still have the belief that if the game is compelling enough to play, people will still be willing to basically jump through hoops to onboard into a Web3 game experience. We saw even with Axie Infinity back in 2021, Web3 onboarding was not figured out at that time. It was very hard to onboard into the ecosystem, and games that have a compelling enough reasons to join, they'll still see users in the short run. Now, as we want to move on to the long term and onboard a broader and broader audience, we're talking like tens of millions of users, that's when we'll really need to fine tune that. But I think we're early enough where if the experience to onboard is good enough and you have a compelling enough reason to be playing the game with Web3 components, then I think we're kind of in the sweet spot right now. So lots of work to do. But it's one of our main focuses at Pixels.
Great, amazing. And I have to ask, why running network? Which advantages that it provides that maybe other networks can't?
Yeah, so for a long time, I had really felt like the relationship between chain to game should feel more like publisher to game. In the Web2 world, right? You go to a publisher, they'll help you distribute your game, and that hadn't really existed in Web3 gaming. There should be mutually aligned incentives between the game and the ecosystem that they're in to help grow each other. And the Ronin team kind of understood that thesis. And they also had one of the most valuable assets in Web3 gaming that people kind of undersold for a long time. They had millions and millions of players onboarded into their chain and ecosystem, and no other Web3 ecosystem has that. Because of the success of Axie Infinity, there were already all of these players that had onboarded into Ronin, and they were ready to start playing other games, or at least that was our hypothesis, and it turned out to be quite true.
Great, amazing. So there have been some recent airdrops, right? Pixel has conducted, if I understand, two significant airdrops, one based on the scores internally on the game, and another one on run staking, right? Could you elaborate on the rationale behind these airdrops and how they align with Pixel's community engagement and growth strategy?
So my job as a Web3 founder is thinking about incentive alignment every single day and how we can grow the ecosystem. And airdrops, tokens, all of this plays into that. Essentially, what I'm trying to do as a founder is to grow our ecosystem to be as strong and possible as it can be. So what we want to do when we start to think about incentives and rewards is we want to think about who are the best people that we can reward that will actually help the ecosystem grow. So we split up our airdrop into a couple different pieces. And part of what we wanted to do was we wanted to get a very healthy user base as we started to move into actually having a token that works in the game that's live. So what we did was we did what we called a play to airdrop, where you had to play your game in the alpha stage. And as a reward, we were going to airdrop you some tokens. What this did was just filtered out for real users who actually liked our game quite well. And then the other part of what we wanted to do when we were thinking about, how do we start to bootstrap and kick off this ecosystem was, are there other groups of users who are likely to play our game that just haven't gotten the exposure or the reason to check it out yet? And that was one of the intentions behind the airdrop to Ronin stakers. It's all of these people who had already been onboarded into Web3 gaming who maybe just didn't have a reason to check out their game yet. This gave them a pretty compelling reason to do it. For me, it's just user acquisition, right? And it ended up going quite well. I think we kind of reawakened all of Southeast Asia with the Ronin stake and rewards, which is pretty cool to see that. And yeah, so far we'll basically continue that ethos as we have a live game and as we continue the next stages of what we're doing.
Great. Also, a significant step, right, was the Binance Lunch pool. How has being featured on Binance Lunch pool enhanced Pixel visibility and credibility?
Yeah, that's been a huge difference maker. Even when you're just talking about raw numbers, like daily active users, over the last 2 days, I think our daily active users have increased like 200 to 300%. We've gone from about 160,000 to I think we had about 320,000 daily active users just yesterday.
I'm on that list, I had to say.
Amazing. And yeah, I mean, they are, the biggest crypto exchange in the world. They not just have like a ton of volume, but they have a ton of users as well. And when I think about what I want us to advance, I always am looking for us to, bring on more users into our game. So obviously it was great exposure into like more people with crypto. And obviously it was great exposure just as marketing inside of the game too. I think it was, one of the best things that we've done as well. Very aligned because what we're trying to target in the early days of Pixels before we start to expand upon other audiences is we want to onboard crypto native users because they already understand why Web3 is interesting. They already kind of get the blockchain side of things, and we don't need to convince them why it's interesting. That's going to be the next set of users that we target afterwards. But for us, when we think about like the steps to massive growth, we start with the easiest to target users. So for us, that was Ronin. Then it's like the greater crypto community. Then it's gamers. Then it's moms and dads, aunts, uncles, all of that.
Amazing. Before moving to a section more for maybe it would be interesting for the gamers, a few questions that I know they want to ask you. I wasn't planning to speak about price because I don't think it makes sense, but we have to say the elephant in the room is that the expected price that was quite a considerable one was overpassed, right? So it was a very successful launch. We have to mention that, of course. What do you feel? How do you feel about that? It makes you. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, so my focus as a founder is really just focusing on the metrics that I think move the needle the most, which are daily active users, retention inside of the ecosystem, and then also how the game is actually using the pixel token too. That's the stuff that we're looking at really heavily. So, everything else that happens, I don't think that's actually important to the long-term mission of what we're trying to do. The mission at Pixels here is to build this company that has the same impact on gaming that Zynga did in Web2 gaming. And I truly believe that Pixels has a really interesting opportunity. We're positioned very well now to make massive changes into how most users interact with consumer applications. I think it starts with gaming, and I think it expands into other areas. So yeah, I am really just focused on that core mission rather than any of these other metrics that seem a bit noisy to me.
Of course. So now moving to your vision. What's your long-term vision for Pixel?
Yeah. So again, I think we are really fortunate to be positioned well to create massive changes in the way that users interact with consumer applications. So what we already see a trend of happening in Web 2 are creator programs. We see companies like YouTube and TikTok actually reserving some of the money generated by their ecosystem, and they're paying content creators for the content that they create. This is a general trend that's happening across all of Web 2 and consumer applications. And this is what I actually think is a huge opportunity in gaming that hasn't been tapped into. And Web 3 is actually a way to make that so much more seamless. So I truly believe this is the future of gaming. And what we want to be doing is we want to be building out the next generation of gaming, essentially. Can we create games that create new incentive alignments that didn't exist in Web 2? And can we create games that are actually hyper competitive against Web 2 games? The opportunity here, if we pull all this off, is insane. It's a company with the same magnitude scale as a company I really respect, Zynga. And that's kind of the mission here.
Great. Amazing. Regarding content creators here in South America, Latin America, everyone is talking about Pixels. Every content creator is talking about it. When can we expect a Spanish version of the game?
Yeah, so we've already been working with a few of the content creators and guilds in South America to help us start translating socials, all of that side of things. Localization is really important, and that's one thing that we'll start to focus on as we're a bit more capitalized now. Like, for example, we are also going to be targeting APAC markets quite soon, and we're fortunate enough that a lot of Spanish-speaking world, can at least speak some English, but that's a blocker to larger adoption in all of these markets that we want to focus on as well too. So we understand that, and that's something that we're working on.
Also to have the full experience, because maybe you can play, but you maybe are missing some details. So
Yeah,
great. Maybe expect in the future. And something everyone wants to know: when dungeons?
Wait, when what?
When dungeons? When are the
When
dungeons?
dungeons, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, we have some really cool features that are coming up involving more competitive elements of gameplay. And it's interesting because when you think combat inside of the game, normally people just go straight to like PvP or like swords or guns, things like that. But there's actually other ways that you can introduce competitive gameplay inside of game loops. And I think that's what we're actually targeting first. We're more interested in economic competition, essentially. And I think that fits in with the line of crypto gaming a lot too. So these dungeons are in progress right now. I think we're probably a month or two away from releasing them. We have a few other changes that we'll be rolling out first. Changes related to resource generation, progression inside of the game. We're calling it Chapter 2. And this dungeons feature that we're releasing is basically going to be the first element of true competitive gameplay inside of it. It's going to be more oriented around guilds at first. So essentially, guilds will compete to travel through dungeons and eventually discover what we call contestable lands. These contestable lands will be the source of the most rare resources inside of pixels. And those most rare resources will be able to be turned in for more pixel rewards. So it kind of completes this new interesting loop inside of the game. But yeah, we're really excited about that. And it's a system that we'll be able to expand on more when we actually have more developed out, like combat, like swords, all that kind of stuff that people are expecting, or with pets. Then these dungeons will be a base for that as well too.
Great, great. Well, thank you very much, Luke, for joining again. Once again, thanks for your time. And I have to congratulate you on what you're building. Please keep building because we're adding a ton to this ecosystem. Thank you very much, Luke.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man.